Now, there may be a lot of suspicion because I know that people have died in here recently over COVID. And to my left, you know, this is the first time I've ever been down here in years, absolute many years. And normally I don't go past this ridge up here. And like there's a bit of a dig here to the left of me, which is very interesting and a bit spooky, you know, a bit creepy when you think about it. But you know, so is Paradise Lost. Okay, so into book 2. I'm comfortable enough. High on a throne of royal state, which far outshone the wealth of Ormuz and of Ind, or where the gorgeous East with richest hand showers on her kings barbaric pearl and gold. Satan exalted sat, by merit raised to that bad eminence, and from despair thus high uplifted beyond hope, aspires beyond thus high, initiate to pursue vain war with heaven, and by success untaught, his proud imaginations thus displayed. Power and dominions, deities of heaven, for since no deep within her gulf can hold immortal vigor through the oppression and fallen, I give not heaven for lost. From this descent, celestial virtues rising will appear more glorious and more dread than from no fall, and trust themselves to fear no second fate. Methought just right, and the fixed laws of heaven did first create your leader, next free choice, with what besides in council or in fight hath been achieved of merit, yet this loss, thus far at least, recovered hath much more, established in a safe, unenvied throne, yielded with full consent. The happier state in heaven, which follows dignity, might draw envy from each inferior. But who here will envy whom the highest place exposes, foremost to stand against the thunderer's aim, your bulwark, and condemns to greatest share of endless pain? Where there is then no good from which to strive, no strife can grow up there from fraction, for none sure will claim in hell precedence, none, whose portion is so small of present pain, that with ambitious minds will covet more. That with ambitious minds, with this advantage then to union and firm faith and firm accord, more than can be in heaven, we now return to claim our just inheritance of old, surer to prosper than prosperity could have assured us, and by what best way, whether of open war or coveted guile, we now debate, who can advise may speak. He ceased, and next him Moloch, sceptered king, stood up, the strongest and the fiercest spirit that fought in heaven, now fiercer by despair. His trust was with the eternal, to be deemed equal in strength, and rather than be less, cared not to be at all. With all that care lost, went all his fear of God or hell or worse. He recked not, and these words thereafter spake: My sentence is for open war, of wiles more unexpert, I boast not. Them let loose, contrive who need, or when they need, not now. For while they sit contriving shall the rest, millions that stand in arms, in longing wait, the signals to ascend, sit lingering here, heaven's figures, and for their dwelling place, except this dark, opprobrious den of shame, the prison of his tyranny who reigns by our delay? No, let us rather choose, armed with hell flames and fury all at once, or heaven high towers to force resistless way, turning our tortures into horrid arms. Against the torturer, when to meet the noise of his almighty engine, he shall hear infernal thunder, and for lighting see black fire and horror shot with equal rage among his angels, and his throne itself mixed with Tartarian sulfur and strange fire, his own invented torments. But perhaps the way seems difficult and steep to scale with upright wing against a higher foe. Let such bethink them, if the sleepy drench of that forgetful lake benumb not still, that in our proper motion we ascend. Up to the native seat, descent and fall to us is adverse. Who but fell of late, when the fierce foe hung on our broken rear, insulting, and pursued us through the deep, with what compulsion and laborious flight we sunk thus low? The scent is easy then, the vent is feared, should we ever again provoke our stronger, some worse way his wrath may find to our destruction. If there be in hell fear, or to be worse destroyed, what can be worse than to dwell here, driven out from bliss, condemned in this abhorred deep to utter woe, where pain of unextinguishable fire must exercise us without hope of end, the vassals of his anger, when the scourge inexorably and the torturing hours call us to penance. More destroyed than thus, we should be quite abolished and expire. What fear we then? What doubt we to incense his utmost ire? Which to the height and rage will either quite consume us and reduce to nothing this essential? Happier far than miserable to have eternal being, or if our substance be indeed divine and cannot cease to be, we are at worst on this side of nothing, and by proof we feel our power sufficient to disturb his heaven, and with perpetual inroads to alarm, though inaccessible, his fatal throne, which if not victory yet revenge. He ended frowning, and his look denounced desperate revenge and battle dangerous, to less than gods. On the other side of uprose Belial in act more graceful and humane. A fair person lost not heaven, he seemed, for dignity composed and high exploit. But all was false and hollow, through his tongue dropped manna, and could make the worse appear, the better reason to perplex and dash. Mature his counsels, for his thoughts were low, to vice industrious, but to nobler deeds, timorous and slothful, yet he pleased the ear, and with persuasive accent thus began: I should be much for open war, O peers, as not behind in hate, if what we urged, main reason to persuade immediate war, did not dissuade me most, and seems to cast ominous conjecture on the whole success, when he who most excels in fact of arms, in what he counsels and what excels, mistrustful, grounds his courage on despair and utter dissolution, as the scope of all his aim after some dire revenge. First, what revenge? The towers of heaven are filled with impregnable oft, the bordering deep encamp their legions, or the obscure wing scout far and wide into the realm of night, scorning surprise. Or could we break our way by force, and on our heels all hell should rise, heaven purest light, yet our great enemy, all incorruptible, would be on his throne, sit unpolluted, and the ethereal mold, incapable of stain, would soon expel her mischief and purge off the Basford fire victorious. Thus repulsed our final hope, is flat despair. We must expirate the almighty victor to spend all his rage, and that must end, that we must be our cure to be no more, sad cure, for who and whose loss, through full pain, this intellectual being, those thoughts that wander through eternity to perish rather, swallowed up and lost in the wide womb of uncreated night, devoid of sense and motion. And who knows, let this be good whether our angry foe can give it, or will it ever? How he can is doubtful, that he never will is sure. Will he, so wise, let loose at once his ire, be like through the impotence or unaware to give his enemies their wish and end them in anger, whom his anger saves, to punish endless? Wherefore cease we then? Say they who counsel war, we are decreed, reserved and destined to eternal woe. Whatever doing, and we suffer more. What can we suffer worse? It is this then worse, thus sitting, thus consulting, thus in arms? What will be fled amain, pursued and struck, with heaven afflicting thunder, and besought the deep to shelter us? This hell then seemed a refuge from those wounds, or when we lay chained on the burning lake. That sure was worse. What if the breath that kindled those grim fires awake should blow them into sevenfold rage, and plunge us into the flames? Or from above should intermitted vengeance arm against his right hand to plague us? Or from above, what if all her stores were open, and this firmament of hell should sprout her cataracts of fire, impendent horrors, threatening hideous fall one day upon our heads, while we perhaps designing our extorting glorious war, caught in a fiery tempest, shall be hurled, each on his rock transfixed, the sport and prey of racking whirlwinds, or forever sunk under yon boiling ocean, wrapped in chains, there to converse with everlasting groans, unrespited, unpitied, unreprived. Age of hopeless end, this would be worse. War, therefore, open or concealed alike, my voice dissuades, for what can force or guile with him, or whose deceive his mind, whose eye view all things at one view? He from heaven high, all these our motions vain, see and deride, not more almighty to resist our might, than wise to frustrate all our plots and wiles. Shall we then live thus vile, the race of heaven, thus trampled, thus expelled to suffer here, chains and then torments? Better these than worse, by my advice, since fate inevitable subdues us, an omnipotent decree the victor's will, to suffer as to do. Our strength is equal, nor the law unjust, that so ordains that this was first resolved. If we were wise against so great a foe, contending, and so doubtful what might fall. I laugh, when those who are at the spear are bold, and venturous if to fail them, shrink in fear. What yet they know must follow to endure exile or ignominy or bonds or pain, the sentence of their conqueror. This is now our doom, which if we can sustain and bear, our supreme foe in time may much remit his anger, and perhaps, thus far removed, not minding us, not offending, satisfied with what is punished, whence these raging fires will slacken if his breast stirs not their flames. Our purer essence then will overcome their noxious vapor, or inured not feel, or changed at length, and to place conformed in temper and in nature will receive familiar the fierce heat and void of pain. This horror will grow mild, this darkness light. Besides, what hope the never-ending flight of future days may bring? What chance, what change, worth waiting, since our presence lost appears, for having through but ill not worst, if we procure not to ourselves more woe. Thus Belial, with words closed, in reason garb, counseled ignoble ease with peaceful sloth, not peace, and after him Mammon spake. Either to disenthrone the King of Heaven we war, if war be best, or to reign, our own right lost. Him to unthrone we then may hope, with everlasting fate shall yield to fickle chance and chaos, judge the strife. The former vain to hope argues as vain, the latter, for what place can be for us? Within heaven bound, unless heaven Lord supreme, we overpower. Suppose we should relent, and publish grace to all, on promises made, of new subjection, with what eyes could we stand in his presence humble, and receive strict laws imposed, to celebrate his throne, with warbled hymns, and to his Godhead sing, forced hallelujahs, while he lordly sits, our envied sovereign, and his altar breathes, ambrosial odors and ambrosial flowers, our several offerings. This must be our task in heaven, this our delight. How wearisome eternity so spent in worship paid to whom we hate. Let us not then pursue by force impossible to leave obtain unacceptable, though in heaven our state of splendid vassalage, but rather sleek our own goods from ourselves, and from our own lives to ourselves, though in this vast recess free, and to none accountable, preferring hard liberty before the easy yoke of servile pomp. Our greatness will appear, then most conspicuous, when great things of small, useful of hurt, prosperous of averse, we can create, and what place soever thrive under evil, and work ease out of pain. Through labor and endurance, this deep world of darkness do we dread. How oft amidst thick clouds and dark doth heaven all-ruling Sire choose to reside, his glory unobscured, and with the majesty of darkness round cover his throne, from whence deep thunders roar. Mustn't ring their rage, and heavens resembles hell. As he our darkness cannot we light imitate when we please. This desert soil wants nor hidden luster, gems and gold, nor want we skill or art, from whence to raise magnificence, and what can heaven show more? Our torments may also in length of time, because our elements, these piercing fires, as soft as now severe, are tempered changed into their temper, which must needs remove the sensible of pain. All things invite to peaceful counsels and settled state of order, how in safety best we may compose our present evils with regard of what we are and where, dismissing quite all through of war. Ye have what I advise. He scarce had finished when such murmur filled the assembly as when hollow rocks retain the sound of blustering winds, which all night long had roused the sea, now with the hoarse cadence lull. Seafaring men o'erwatched, whose bark by chance of or pinnacle anchors in the craggy bay, after the tempest, such applause was heard as Mammon endured, and his sentence pleased. Advising peace for such another field, they dreaded worse than hell, so much the fear of thunder and the sword of Michael wrought still within them, and no less desire to found this neither empire, which might rise by policy in long process of time, in emulation opposite to heaven, which then Beelzebub perceived, than whom Satan, except not higher sat, with grave aspect he rose, and his rising seemed a pillar of state, deep on his front, engraven deliberation sat and public care, and priestly counsel in his face yet shone, majestic through in ruin, sage he stood, with the Atlantean shoulders fit to bear the weight of mightiest monarchies. He drew audience and attention still at night, or summer noontide air, while thus he spake. Thrones and imperial powers, offspring of heaven, ethereal virtues, or these titles now, must we renounce in changing style be called princes of hell. For so the popular vote inclines here to continue, and build up here a growing empire. Doubtless, while we dream, and know not that the kingdom of heaven hath doomed this place our dungeon, nor our safest retreat beyond his potent arm, to live except from heaven's high jurisdiction in new league, banded against his throne, but to remain in strictest bondage, though thus far removed under the inevitable curve reserve his captive multitude, for he, but sure, in height or depth, still first and last our reign, sole king, and his kingdom lose no part by our revolt, but over hell extend his empire, and with iron scepter rule us here, as with the golden those in heaven. What sit we then, projecting peace and war? War hath determined us, and foiled with loss, irreparable terms of peace, yet none vouchsafed or sought, for what peace will be given to us enslaved, but custody severe, and stripes, and arbitrary punishment inflicted? And what peace can we return, but to our power, hostility and hate, untamed reluctance, and revenge thus slow, yet ever plotting how conqueror least may reap his conquest, and may least rejoice in doing what we most in suffering feel? Nor with occasion want, nor shall we need, with dangerous expedition to invade heaven, whose high walls fear no assault or siege. Some ease enterprise, or ambush from the deep. What if we find some easier enterprise? This is a place, if ancient and prophetic fame in heaven erred not, another world, than happy seat of some new race called man, about this time to be created like to us, the less in power and excellence, but favored more of him whose rules above, so was his will, pronounced among the gods and by an oath that shook heaven whole circumference, confirmed. Thither let us bend in all our thoughts, to learn what creatures there inhabit, of what mold or substance how endured, and what their power, and where our weakness have attempted best, by force or subtlety. Though heaven be shut, and heaven high arbitrator sit secure in his own strength, this place may lie exposed, the utmost border of his kingdom, left to their defense who hold it. Here perhaps some advantageous act may be achieved by sudden onset, either with hellfire, to waste his whole creation, or possess all as our own, and drive as we were driven, the puny inhabitants, if not our drive, seduce them to our party, that their God may prove their foe, with repenting hand abolish his own works. This would surpass common revenge, and interrupt his joy in our confusion, and our joy upraised in his disturbance, when his darling sons, hurled headlong to partake with us, shall curse their frail original and faded bliss, faded so soon. Advise, if this be worth attempting, or to sit in darkness here, hatching vain empires. Thus Beelzebub pleaded his devilish counsel, first devised by Satan, and in part proposed for whence but from the author of all ill could spring so deep a malice, to confound the race of mankind in one root, and earth with hell to mingle and involve, done all in spite to the great Creator? But their spite still serves his glory to augment. The bold designs please highly those who infernal states enjoy, sparkled in all their eyes with full assent. They vote, whereat his speech he thus renews, well have ye judged, well ended long debate, synod of gods, and like to what ye are, great things resolved, which from the lowest deep will once more lift us up in spate of fate nearest our ancient seat, perhaps in view of those bright confines whence with our neighboring arms re-enter heaven, or else in some mild zone dwell, not unvisited of heaven fair light secure, and at the brightening orient beam purge off this gloom, this soft delicious air, to heal the scar of these corrosive fires, shall beneath her balm. But first whom shall we send in search of those who of this new world, whom shall find sufficient? Who shall tempt with wandering feet the dark unbottomed infinite abyss? And though the palatable obscure find out his uncouth way, or spread his airy flight, upborne with indefatigable wings, over the vast abrupt, ere he arrive, the happy isle. What strength, what art can then suffice, or what evasion bear him safe through the strict sentries and stations thick of all angels watching round? Here he had need of all circumspection, and we know no less choice in our suffrage. For on whom we send, the weight of all our last hope relies. Thus said, he sat, and expectation held, his look suspense, awaiting who appeared to second or oppose or undertake the perilous attempt. But all sat mute, pondering the dangers with deep thoughts, and each, in other's countenance, read his own dismay, astonished. None among the choice and prime of those heaven-warring champions could be found so hardy as to proffer or accept alone in the dreadful voyage, till at least Satan, whom now transcend glory, raised above his fellows, with monarchical pride, conscious of high worth, unmoved thus spake: O progeny of heaven, imperial thrones, with reason hath thee silence and demure seized us, though dismayed, long is the way, and hard, that out of hell leads us to the light. I like this better. Our prison is strong, this huge convex of fire, outrageous to devour, immune us round ninefold, and gates of burning adamant, barred over us, prohibit all egress. Thus past, if any pass, the void profound of unessential night receives him next, wide gapping, and with utter loss of being threatens him, plunged that in the abortive gulf, or unknown region, what remains him less? Thus unknown dangers as hard escape. But I should ill become this throne, O peers, and this imperial sovereignty, adorned with splendor, armed with power, if aught proposed and judged of public moment, in this shape of difficulty or danger could deter me from attempting. Wherefore do I assume these royalties, and do not refuse to reign, refusing to accept as great as a share of hazards as hazard and of horror due alike to him who reigns, and so much to him due of hazard more, as he above the rest high honored sits. Go therefore, mighty powers, terror of heaven, though fallen, intend at home, where here shall be our home, what best may ease the present misery, and render hell more tolerable, if there be cure or charm to respite or deceive or slack the pain of this ill mansion. Intermit no watch against the wakeful foe, while I abroad through all the coast of dark destruction seek deliverance for all of us, us all. This enterprise none shall partake with me. Thus saying, rose the monarch and prevented all reply, prudent lest from the resolution raised other among the chief might offer now, certain to be refused what erst they feared, and so refused might an option stand, his rival winning cheap the high repute which he thought hazard Hugh must earn, but they dreaded not more the venture than his voice, forbidding, and at once with him they rose. Their rising all at once was as the sound of thunder heard remote. Toward him they bend, with awful reverence prone, and as a god extol him equal to the highest in heaven. Nor failed they express how much they praised, that for the greatest safety he despised his own. For neither do the spirits damned lose all their virtue, lest bad men should boast their specious deeds, so pretending to be worth a secret, which glory cites or clothes ambition varnished o'er with zeal. Thus their doubtful consultations dark ended rejoicing in the matchless chief, as when from mountain tops the dusky clouds ascending, while the north wind sleeps o'erspread heaven's cheerful face, the luring element scour over the darkened landscape, snow or shower, if chance the radiant sun with farewell sweet extend his evening beam, the fields revive, the birds their notes renew, and bleating herds attest their joy, that hill and valley rings. O shame to men, devil with devil damned, firm concord holds, men only disagree, of creatures rational, though under hope of heavenly grace and God proclaiming peace. Yet live in hatred, enmity, and strife among themselves, and levy cruel wars, wasting the earth, each other to destroy, as if, which might induce us to accord, man had not hellish foes in no besides, that day and night for his destruction wait. The Stygian council thus dissolved, and forth in order came the grand infernal peers, Midst came their mighty paramount, and seemed alone their antagonist of heaven, nor less thou hell-dread emperor with pomp supreme, and godlike imitated state him round a globe of fiery Sephirim enclosed with bright emblazonry and horrent arms. Then of their session ended their bid cry, with trumpet regal sounds, with the great result. Toward the four winds 4 speedy cherubim put to their mouths the sounding alchemy, by hurting voice explained, the hollow abyss, heard far and wide, and all the hosts of hell, with a deafening shout, returned them loud acclaim. Thus more at ease, their minds is somewhat raised, by false presumptuous hope, the ranged powers, disband and wandering, each his several way, pursued his inclined or sad choice, lead him perplexed, where he may likeliest find truce to his reckless thoughts, and entertain the irksome hours till his greatest chief return, put on the plain or in the air of sublime, upon the wing or in swift race contend, as at the Olympian games or Pythian fields, past curb their fiery steeds, or shun the goal, with rapid wheels or fronted brigades form, as when the warm, proud city's war appears, waits to be in troubled sky, and armies rush to battle in the clouds, before each van, prick forth the airy night, and couch their spears, till thickest legion close, with feats of arms, from either end of heaven the welkin burns, other with the vast Typhoon rage more fell, rend up both rocks and hills, and ride the air in whirlwind, hell scarce holds the wild uproar, as when Alcides from Ochnea crowned with conquest, felt their envenomed robed, and tore through pain up by the roots Thessalian pines, and Lycas from the top of Ota through into the Eubonic Sea. Others more mild retreated in a silent valley, sing with notes angelical to many a harp their own heroic deeds and hapless fall by doom of battle, and complain that fate, free virtue, should enthrall the force or chance. Their song was partial, but the harmony, what could it less when spirits immortal sing, suspend, hell, and took with ravishment the throning audience, in discourse more sweet, for eloquence the soul, song charmed the sense, otherwise apart sat on a hill retired, in thoughts more elevate, and reason high, of providence, foreknowledge, will and fate, fixed fate, free will, foreknowledge absolute, and found no end, in wandering mazes lost. Of good and evil much they argued then, of happiness and final misery, passion and apathy, and glory and shame, vain wisdom all false philosophy. Yet with pleasure pleasing sorcery could charm, pain for while, or anguish and excite, fallacious hope, or arm the obdurate breast, with stubborn patience as with triple steel. Another part in squadrons and gross bands, on bold adventure to discover wide that this dismal world, if any clime perhaps, might yield them easy habitation, bend 4 ways their flying march along the banks of 4 infernal rivers that disgorge into the burning lake that baleful streams. Abhorred Styx, the flood of deadly hate, said Acheron of sorrow, black and deep, Cocytus, named of lamentation loud, Cocytus, of lamentation loud, heard on the rueful stream, fierce Phlegethon, whose waves a torrent fire inflamed with rage, far off from the slow and silent stream, left the river of oblivion rolls, her watery labyrinth, where of who drinks, forthwith his former state and being forget both joy and grief, pleasure and pain. Beyond this flood of frozen continent lies dark and wild, beat with perpetual storms of whirlwind and dire hail, which on firm land thaws not, but gathers heap, and ruined seam of ancient pile, all else deep snow and ice, a gulf profound that of Serbonian bog. Got a lot to go here still. Betwixt Dementia and Mount Cassius old, were armies whose armies whole have sunk, the parching air burns for and cold performs the effect of fire thithering by harpy-footed furies hailed. At certain revolutionaries, all the damned are brought and feel by turns the bitter change of fierce extremes, extremes by change more fierce, from beds of raging fire to starve in ice. Their soft ethereal warmth and therein to pine, immovable and fixed and frozen round periods of time. Thus hurried back to fire, they ferried over this Lethean sound, both to and fro their sorrow to augment, and wish and struggle as they pass to reach the tempting stream, with one small drop to lose, in sweet forgetfulness all pain and woe, all in one moment, and so near the brink. But faithful withstands, and to oppose the attempt, Medusa with Gregorian terror guards. The ford of itself the water lies, all taste living white, as once it fled, the lips of Tantalus. Thus roving on in confused march forlorn, the adventurous bands, with shutting horror pale, and eyes aghast, viewing first their lamentable lot, found no rest, though many a dark or dreary vale they passed, and many a region dolorous, o'er many a frozen, many a fiery Alp, rocks, caves, lakes, fens, bogs, dens, and shades of death, a universe of death, which God by curse created evil, for evil only good, where all life dies, death lives, and nature breeds, perverse, all monstrous and prodigious things, abominable, unutterable, and worse than fabled yet had feigned or feared conceived, Gregorn on hydras and chimeras dire. Meanwhile, the adversary of God and man, Satan, with thoughts inflamed of highest design, put on swift wings, and through the gates of hell explores the solitary flight. Sometimes he scours the right-hand coast, sometimes the left. Now shaves with level wing the deep, then soars up the fiery concave, towering high, as when far off at sea a fleet descried hangs on the clouds by equatorial winds, close sailing of Bengala, or the isles of Ternate and Theodore, whence merchants bring their spicy drugs. They on the trading floods through the wide Ethiopian to the Cape ply, stemming nightly towards the pole. So seemed far off the flying fiend. At last appeared, hell-bound's highest reach to the horrid roof, and thus threefold the gates, threefold were brass. 3 iron, 3 adamantine rock, impenetrable, impaled with circling fire, yet unconsumed. Before the gates there sat, on either side, a formidable shape. The one seemed a woman to the waist and fair, but ended foul in many a scary fold. Voluminous and vast, a serpent armed with mortal sting, about her middle round, a cry of hellhounds never ceasing barked, with wide Serbian mouths full loud, and wrung a hideous pearl. Yet when they list, would creep, if aught disturbed their noise, into her womb, and kennelled there, yet there still barked and howled within unseen, far less abhorred than these vexed Scalia, bathing in the sea that parts Calabria from the horse Trinicarian shore, nor uglier falling that night hag, when called in secret, riding through the air, she comes lured with the smell of infant blood, to dance with Lapland witches, while the laboring moon eclipses at their charms. The other